Hello, my friends and foes. It's almost Halloween, so to mark the occasion, we're going to be talking about the one person who has a more unsettling blue-eyed stare than I do. No, it's not Miley Cyrus, it's this woman. If you've seen my Pokémon creepypastas, June Archive, or Shock Sites videos, she should look familiar to you, because she's on my shirt. Link in description if you want to cop that shirt for yourself, by the way, since a lot of people were asking in the comments. She might also look familiar to you if you're just old as fuck and have been chronically online since before some of the people watching this were born. This woman is Allison Harvard, also known as Creepy-chan. No relation to Chris-chan, since I know someone is going to make that joke in the comments. In the lawless wasteland that was the early 2000s internet, she found herself unwittingly becoming a meme before the term had even come into popular usage, and later on, a reality TV star. I find the lore of the Creepy-chan meme, and of Allison herself, to be quite interesting, so I thought it would be fun to do a little deep dive. Allison Harvard was a 90s kid, meaning she was amongst the first generation to grow up alongside the internet. By the time she reached her teen years, she had become enamored with the internet, frequenting sites like GeoCities, Rotten.com, eBaum's World, and LiveJournal. When not browsing the web, she liked to create art, with painting and photography being her two main mediums of choice. When MySpace, one of the first major social media websites, launched in 2003, she decided to make an account to share her work with the world. Allison had always been fascinated by the weird and creepy, and she wanted to use her photography to blend a dark and harsh aesthetic with a softer one. She was inspired by Kinderhorror fashion and riot girl bands like Hole and Bikini Kill, author of gothic fiction Anne Rice, and photographer Francesca Woodman. She began creeping around her house late at night, propping up her camera and using the self-timer to take pictures of herself, often wearing dark eye makeup, vintage dresses, and fake blood, gazing into the lens with what would become her signature people with blue eyes stare. She found it was a good outlet for her teenage angst, much to the chagrin of her parents who were frequently awakened by her nighttime wanderings. The most famous of these pictures is probably the one where she's standing on a table bent over at the waist wearing a pink dress. In a Reddit AMA, she said of this photo that the dress was hand-sewn by her friend, and she posted it because she liked how her neck looked. In 2005, a 4chan user stumbled across Allison's photos and posted them to the site's B board, its most popular and notorious board. This first post doesn't appear to have been archived, and I was unable to search for it myself because, unsurprisingly, 4chan has been excluded from the Wayback Machine. The closest I was able to find was this passing mention of her in a thread from 2007, but the attached image file is broken. 4chaners were enthralled by this spooky-looking girl, and she ended up becoming popular on X, the site's paranormal board, where she earned the nicknames Tussin-chan, after Robitussin due to her vaguely drugged-out appearance, and Creepy Little Friend. But the name that ended up sticking was Creepy-chan. She became known as the Queen of X. At first, Allison was unaware of her newfound 4chan fame, until one day a friend emailed her a link to a thread in which she was being discussed. When she found her photos posted all over the site, she initially wasn't sure what to do. She admitted to freaking out a little, and apparently even emailed the site's administrator, Moot, demanding rather naively that he take her pictures down. However, she felt more at ease once she looked closer at the threads, and saw that she was being positively received for the most part. People weren't making fun of her or anything, they genuinely liked her photos. Keep in mind that this was the very early days of 4chan, and the culture was markedly different than it is now. At this point, it was more of a source of silly memes than of trolling and controversy. As the decade wore on, Allison's photos spread outside of 4chan, being reposted on various other websites. This was the golden era of creepypastas and emo, so her photos were edited by folks across the web to be even creepier than they originally were. The popularity of her photos and the mostly positive reaction to them gave her the confidence to keep going with her photography. But 4chan users weren't the only ones Allison's photos caught the attention of. In 2008, she received a MySpace DM from someone claiming to be a casting producer for the reality TV show America's Next Top Model, inviting her to a closed casting call. However, in the early days of the internet, we were taught that basically no one you encountered online was who they said they were, and that you should never reveal any personal information. Unlike nowadays, where everyone's using their full government name to post the most unhinged things imaginable. So Allison was rightfully suspicious of this message and initially ignored it. The producer wanted Allison on the show so badly though that she somehow got a hold of her home phone number and called and spoke to her mother, convincing her to come to the audition. She showed up wearing jeans and flip-flops and feeling very out of place, but she managed to secure a spot on the 12th cycle of ANTM. which began airing in the spring of 2009. She quickly stood out from the other contestants with her unique look and quirky personality. One of her most notable moments on the show was in the very first episode of the season, where she admitted to having a fascination with blood and thinking nosebleeds are pretty.
One thing that you say is beautiful and it's unfair that you've never had one. What is that?
Nosebleeds.
What does that mean?
I have a really big fascination with blood, and so I just think it looks really pretty, and
I used to get them all the time as a child.
Jealous.
No, but she was actually real as fuck for that. No mention was made of Allison's online notoriety as Creepy-chan on the show, but just as she was online, she became pigeonholed as the weird creepy girl, leading showrunners to add in Darkwood Circus music anytime she was on screen. Despite having no prior formal modeling experience, she performed really well on the show, coming in second place in the finale. It even seems to be a common opinion among fans of the show that she was robbed. I'm not really a reality TV girly, and I've never watched ANTM, so I can't give my own opinion on this, but it does look like she was a fan favorite during the season she appeared. This could be due in part to her 4chan simps tuning into the show, but 4chan was fairly niche at the time, so I think it's more likely that she simply won audiences over with her talent and likable personality. As the show was airing, her fame that was previously relegated to online image boards began to bleed into real life, and people started to recognize her in her classes at the University of New Orleans, where she was studying art. 2 years later, she was invited back onto the show for the 17th cycle, the series' first all-star edition featuring contestants from previous cycles, where she once again placed in second. In today's online climate, the lifespan of a meme is maybe a few weeks if you're lucky before it becomes overused, co-opted by brands, and finally reaches your aunt on Facebook. The meme of Creepy-chan, however, managed to endure for years after its inception. I think this was thanks in large part to the release and rise of Tumblr in the late 2000s and 2010s. Yes, I'm talking about Tumblr again. I'm basically the less cool strange eons at this point. I definitely was not using 4chan in the 2000s, or ever for that matter, so Tumblr was where I was introduced to Creepy-chan. Tumblr's search function is booty cheeks, to be quite honest, so there's not really any way of knowing when Allison's photos were first posted to the site, but I was able to find a blog dedicated to her created in 2009, around the time her first season of ANTM was airing. I am one of the brave souls still using Tumblr regularly in 2024, and I still see her pictures circulating around to this day. It's no surprise to me that the Creepy-chan photos were a hit with the girlies on Tumblr. Among people who weren't really on the site during its heyday, I mostly see it associated with fandom or social justice communities, but aesthetic communities were really big too. They were the precursor to the TikTok aesthetics of today. One of these aesthetics that was popular in the first half of the 2010s was morute, a portmanteau of morbid and cute, sometimes known as sad baby doll, although morute is actually a more recent term that has been retroactively applied to this aesthetic. Kind of wish they came up with something that sounded a little nicer, though. People weren't quite as obsessed with labels then as they are now, so the members of this community didn't really call themselves anything at the time. They were just a group of mainly young women who had similar tastes in music, fashion, art, and other media, and naturally grouped together. They were interested in the dichotomy between hyper-femininity and cuteness, and darker, macabre, or even violent imagery. You may have noticed that this sounds very similar to how Allison described the inspiration behind her photography. Some of the major figures in this scene included musician and artist Nicole Dollanganger, photographers Jess Woods and Millie Dalgraves, and visual artist Alice Snow. The kinds of photos these ladies were posting to Tumblr were often reminiscent of the things Allison would post to her MySpace, and sometimes they would even reblog pictures of her, so it's clear she was an inspiration to them. While this Tumblr community was relatively niche, take a shot every time I say the word niche in this video, it inspired some much larger Tumblr, Instagram, and TikTok aesthetic trends in the following years, such as coquette, traumacore, e-girl, and regional gothic. So basically Allison Harvard crawled so Nicole Dollanganger could walk so Ethel Kane could run. Also, side note, I really enjoyed researching this part of the video, so please tell me a deep dive into Tumblr aesthetics is something you would be interested in seeing. Allison was one of the earliest examples of a niche internet micro-celebrity, and she served as the blueprint for the MySpace scene queens, Tumblr fashion bloggers, and TikTok e-girls that came after her. She was also able to translate her internet fame into IRL fame, something I don't think anyone had really done before at that point. While Creepy-chan's legacy persists to this day, I feel like a lot of people lost track of Allison Harvard after her time on America's Next Top Model. Thanks to her performance on the show, she was offered a modeling contract, modeling for several brands and walking the runway at both New York and LA Fashion Week in 2012. She seemed to become really popular in the Philippines for some reason, and did some TV work there throughout the 2010s, including hosting the show Mega Fashion Crew Reloaded and being a judge on Celebrity Dance Battle. She starred in the indie film Insensate in 2013, and appeared in a Pixies music video in 2019 for their song on Graveyard Hill. According to her Instagram and Reddit, she currently works in art direction and production while continuing her modeling, photography, and painting practices. In 2021, during the height of the NFT craze, she decided to sell some of her original Creepy-chan photos as NFTs. If you know me, you know my thoughts on anything related to cryptocurrency, but Allison has said that this decision was fueled by a desire to reclaim these images that had been being spread and appropriated all over the internet for close to 20 years, so I do have to respect that. And if this conversion is correct, it looks like she made bank off of them, so good for her. She also recently got married and had a baby. It's nice to see that internet fame was a net positive for her, and provided her with all of these crazy opportunities she probably wouldn't have gotten otherwise. Especially since the same can't be said for most of the other people 4chan has developed a fixation on over the years. She still gets mentioned in threads even now, and it seems her legacy as the Queen of X is everlasting. If you're interested in seeing what she's up to nowadays, she is active on Instagram at Allie Harvard. Had you ever heard of Creepy-chan or Allison before now? Which is your favorite Creepy-chan photo? Did you watch her on America's Next Top Model? I would love to hear your thoughts. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, liking, subscribing, and sharing would be very much appreciated. Happy Halloween, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.